My name is Perihan. I'm the Regional Renewables Manager for UL. You all know UL is a testing, certification, and advisory company, and we are also doing a lot of work for the EVs, and we have testing facilities, and I'm really honored to be moderating this panel. So all our guests, first, welcome to today's panel, Green Mobility in MENA region. We will be discussing all challenges and opportunities. We have very valuable panelists today. You know that like governments around the globe are now very focused on EVs, implementing a lot of policies, and there is a demand from end users to the new technology solutions. So we are going to discuss all of them one by one, and you will be able to ask all your questions to our panelists. So I would like to start our panel with introducing our valuable panelists. So our first panelist is Rami Abu Haya. He is the CEO of Katek Mobility. Rami is responsible for running all aspects of the business of Katek Mobility. His previous venture includes managing partner of Cubic Art Pixels, strategic waste management solutions, financial and management consulting services in Amman, Jordan, and Abu Dhabi, UAE. So our second executive panelist is Sam Olivier, CEO of Green Parking. Sam is the CEO of FutureLink and Green Parking, and he's a Lebanese-German multicultural professional with a vast international experience in the parking industry for over 20 years as project manager, sales director, and executive of parking companies in MENA, Europe, and Australia, Asia. Green Parking, the group has become the leading supplier of sustainable parking management solutions in the UAE, over 100 project references. Our third speaker is Mark Carson. He is the Director of Customer Experience and Quality, Renault Middle East. Mark has 14 countries throughout MENA and Levant region. He has been based in the Dubai around 8 years right now. Mark joined Renault UK and carried out a number of roles throughout the business, leading the training, technical, and customer satisfaction departments. Prior to moving to the Middle East, he was responsible for network field quality and government liaison and was actively involved in the introduction of Renault electrical vehicle program into the market. And our last panelist is Nasir Al-Shamsi, Director of the Sustainable Mobility BIA. Nasir Al-Shamsi is the Director of Sustainable Transport Projects at BIA, a dedicated professional with over 16 years of experience in government and semi-government sectors. Nasir is an expert in automobility telematics, ranging from electronic vehicle software to automation and sustainable transport solutions. Nasir is responsible for managing E.ON, the region's first commercial green transport company, formed as a joint venture between BIA and Crescent Enterprises. So thank you for all our panelists for joining us today. So our panel will be like, I will be asking questions to our panelists, and all our attendees, please feel free to just write your questions to the right side of the panel, and I will be asking all of those to our panelists. And if possible, before we start, I would like to mention that we have two pools, and the questions, we will see the questions on the stage. If you can answer these questions, we can also discuss at the end of our panel how the results came out and what our panelists are thinking about this question. So, thank you everyone, Mark, Rami, Nasir, and Sam. would you like to say anything to our panelists as an opening remarks? Please, Sam, let's start with you.
Yes, good morning. Thank you very much, Perihan, for this great introduction. Good morning, everyone watching us today here. Background noise. If you could kindly switch off the microphone, it would be very helpful. So, there are not enough electric vehicle chargers. So this is the perception that we have in our GCC countries. And here comes the reason for that is because the general population is not very well informed about all the advantages that electric vehicles offer, and that these myths about electric vehicles are actually not really true. So the range of electric cars has substantially improved in the last couple of years. The price for electric vehicles, if you consider that over the lifetime in which you're using electric vehicles, actually less expensive than combustion engine cars by now. There are a lot of business models where usage of electric cars is more beneficial than combustion engine cars. Tesla, for example, has proven that the lifetime of batteries is more than the previously anticipated 6 to 7 years, because the Teslas introduced to the market for 8 to 9 years. Rami, could you please, your microphone is on. Thank you very much. The general question is here, do we need electric vehicles? Yeah, do we need electric vehicles in our region? And the answer is a clear yes. And there are two main reasons for that. The first main reason is because we need to combat global warming and climate change. So EVs are an important part on meeting global goals on climate change. Global warming must be reduced and must be limited to below 1.5 to 2.0 Celsius increase in accordance to the Paris Agreement targets, to which all GCC countries have committed themselves to. So based on this, more and more countries will decarbonize their electric generations, moving them more to solar and wind energy in order to meet these climate targets. So that means for electric vehicles, manufacturing emissions will further fall for new EV productions, and driving emissions will fall for existing electric vehicles that are on the road. So that's the first reason why we need EVs, climate change. The second important reason is a health issue reason. So you have to know that worldwide, 5 million people die every year because of air pollution. In comparison to this, we have now 1 million people who died because of the corona pandemic. But we have constantly 5 million people dying because of air pollution. And the main cause for air pollution is combustion from industries, but also from combustion engine cars, so transportation emissions. And here the population in the main cities is exposed to fine particles. And these fine particles lead to severe health issues like strokes, heart diseases, lung cancer. 30% of all lung cancer cases in the world are because of air pollution caused by transportation emissions, pneumonia diseases, etc. So electric vehicles produce in this respect zero direct emissions, and they will lead to cleaning up the air in our major cities. And here there's something that many people might not know. The air quality in major hubs that we live in and we love, like Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Riyadh, etc., have a higher pollution level than cities in China, like Shanghai or Beijing, that already have a very bad reputation because of air pollution. Now, one very good thing in our region is that once authorities identify these kind of issues, they are incredibly fast in tackling them. So now I have spoken about perception of electric vehicles, why we need electric vehicles, and now I come to describing where we are with electric vehicles at the moment. So we as a company, we have been promoting electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging systems since 2010. So that's 11 years. And by now, the GCC has less than 5,000 electric cars. So you heard correctly, less than 5,000 electric cars. And whenever I hear this figure, and whenever our listeners hear this figure, they are shocked, as I am shocked. So this is definitely unacceptable. By now, we as a company alone, we have installed more than 500 smart chargers. The market has around 700, 800 smart chargers and GCC. We have now a world record in the ratio between electric vehicles and chargers because there are simply no cars. Based on the need for electric vehicles, we would require in the next couple of years millions of cars. Now, I come here to the last point, explaining what stakeholders need to do in order to substantially increase the number of electric cars. Let's start with the government. In the government, like everywhere else in the world, there are subsidies that help promoting electric vehicles. So in our region, we have a value-added tax that ranges from 5% to 15%. We have import tax on cars that are 5 to 10%. So here we have a ratio the governments can play in with 10% to 25% to be able to subsidize the introduction of electric vehicles in order to combat climate change and in order to reduce air pollution. The second important aspect here that government can do is that they can introduce legislation that new buildings must have electric vehicle chargers. When we come to the car manufacturers, also they have a responsibility because, last year, just to give you another figure, more than 1 million electric vehicles were sold worldwide. In our GCC region, around 1,000 cars. So out of 1,000 cars that were sold in the world market last year by the car manufacturers, 1 car was brought to our region. This is, again, not acceptable, really not acceptable. And so the car manufacturers have a duty and responsibility to give us here to our region a greater share than we have at the moment. And in this respect, here, maybe the biggest responsibility lies on the car dealers, because in our region, we have a segmentation between the car manufacturers that bring their car to the car dealers, and the car dealers have to promote their cars. And the car dealers so far also have the perception that they might not be earning enough money on maintaining these cars and selling spare parts and selling service agreements because these cars don't have a lot of spare parts inside. But this perception must change as well. And then we have the last group that is important, that need to push in order to implement more electric vehicles to make them more successful in our region. These are the developers and the landlords. And here we have two groups. We have the groups, which is a very, very important group in our region. This is the hospitality and shopping center industry. And they are actually doing quite well, installing simple electric vehicle chargers. And the reason why they are doing it, because for them, it's important to attract the people who are driving electric cars. Because if I'm driving an electric car, I'm considered as a medium income individual or higher income individual. They want me to come to the malls, and they want me to come to the hotels, and they pay for the electricity. So we don't have a big issue with these two industries, the hospitality and the shopping center industry. Where we have an issue is with the communities, with the commercial towers, with the residential towers, because they see there are only a couple of cars running around, so why should I make that investment? But this is very short-sighted. In our opinion, within 1 year, 2 years, 3 years maximum, if you don't have an electric vehicle within your compound, no tenant will come and wants to be a tenant in your compound. So it will become a necessary infrastructure product within your facility. And you as a landlord must make sure that you have a concept, you have a system, and that system would be able to service your visitors and your tenants in a customer-friendly way. And here I come to the last point. What kind of electric vehicle charging infrastructure do we have in GCC at the moment? The first one is what we normally see everywhere in the world that comes the beginning is a network provided by utilities. So here in GCC, we have DEWA that started 2013, 2014 to introduce a charging network, which has now a little bit less than 300 chargers, and it has a software and an app concept, so that's running pretty well. And it's also subsidized by DEWA as a utility, because when you use it, you don't have to pay for the charging. But all other countries and all other cities in GCC have basically nothing. So utilities have to do more. The second group of electric vehicle chargers is in the hospitality and shopping center industry. As I said before, they are pushing for having their own local, rather limited systems just to allow people to charge, but they don't have a lot of smart applications. And the third one is what we see in many European, American, and Chinese areas, is where you have private charge point operators that are investing in a network. So in our GCC region, currently it's only Green Parking that made that investment. And the main reason for that is that so far there is no business case. If you only have 5,000 cars in all of GCC, where is the money going to come from rolling out a network of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 chargers? But once we have the numbers of cars finally coming into our region, this is going to dramatically change.
Thank you, Sam. I'm actually very surprised when I heard the figures, because we always see there are many charging stations, green parkings, shopping malls everywhere. So everybody thinks we have very higher figures, but less than 5,000. Yeah, we need to improve these numbers. So I would like to ask Nasir also about his opinions and how he sees green mobility in the region, and his insights about opportunities and challenges. Please, Nasir.
Thank you, Farhan, and thank you for having us here. And good morning, gents. I'm really honored to be part of this panel. And I think me personally, from our market landscape and market study, we believe, like Sam said, we don't have enough electric vehicles in the region. And then we go back and that's actually when we started ION, our startup, with a clear vision on tackling carbon emission vehicles. And that's when we, first of all, started ION. A brief about ION. ION is a UAE-based sustainable mobility company, joint venture with Carson and BIA. The main vision of ION was, it was actually born out of the need for the transportation sector to be less polluting and more enabling. And what we believe as ION will be shaping the future of mobility. And now why we say that? Because our solutions include first and last mile solutions and anything in between. Our key services are on-demand mobility app, which is being used right now in Masdar City. Our autonomous solutions, mainly used for a last mile solution, as an example from, let's say, a good example from a metro, for example, a metro station to a hub, a bus station, etc. We have a good example of corporate transport, which is again being used in Masdar City. And last but not least, the energy networks. Now, when we offer, and why do we consider ourselves unique? Because when we go to a client or when we present our solutions, we come with a complete ecosystem. So we look at ourselves as an ecosystem provider. In some scenarios where when we do the chauffeur service, the first question would come like, okay, how will we charge our car? Then we come up with our solution and we say, we have a complete bundle of solutions, from an electric vehicle to a driver to a charging station. One of our recent success, I would say, or milestone is that we introduced the first, and I think that the guys over here would know about the charging stations we have launched in Yas Marina Circuit. It is the first and the only, as of today, with a total output of 350 kilowatt charging speed. And that was a tender that has been awarded to us. And I think this shows the commitment. And we have been monitoring these stations in Abu Dhabi, the utilization. The demand is really unpredictable. So we cannot even, the demand on these stations is really, I don't have a proper word to express it, but it shows that people really want fast charging stations. So we need to ignore ACs. My colleagues here, Sam and Rami, I'm sure they know about it. We need to ignore AC and we need to purely focus on DC, because that's the biggest challenge when you have electric vehicles. I think the onboard charger on the vehicle actually controls the speed and the current flown into the electric vehicle. As of today, when we see the UAE and the Middle East, and what are they doing in terms of green transportation, I look at, for example, Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi has a clear vision, which aims to strengthen the sustainable mobility, being more efficient, and having an integrated mode of transport, like combining taxis, buses, metros, etc., all under one complete map, complete itinerary, I would say. An integrated multimodal transportation system. And this is a clear vision that was set by the government of Abu Dhabi by year 2030. Dubai has an autonomous strategy that aims to have 25% of its total transportation in Dubai by 2030. So, this is at least in the UAE. Saudi Arabia has built a mega city, NEOM, which claims to be the first zero carbon emission in the region. and it's designed also. When you look at the infrastructure of the city, it's designed to be, or basically, they are planning to create a sustainable mobility ecosystem. They will have a straight line. They call it the line, a 170-kilometer transit-oriented urban public transportation system. Jordan, Rami would know that. I think we always should look at Jordan as an example, as a good example. They have, if I'm not mistaken, they have more than 20,000 electric vehicles, and they have over 10,000 charging stations in Jordan. It's a good example. And the cumulative annual growth rate in Jordan by 2025 is around 34%. So I think we always should look at Jordan as an example. And this is why, this is why ION was actually built. When we look at the strategies, the government strategies, whether it's Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Sharjah, etc., the Gulf, the Middle East, that's where we actually built our own services to deliver and and do good to the environment. Why do we see sustainable mobility as a priority? I think fossil fuels are finite, and they are not an infinite resource. And this makes it, or actually, this gives us, I wouldn't say an impression, but gives us not perception, but I can't find the right word, but it gives us an idea to move away from being relying on oil or other fossil fuels, and because that is there, and because like Sam had mentioned, that the Paris Agreement had been signed. I think it's not only us as service provider, but it's also the community itself should have a job to do when it comes to choosing and championing different modes of transport. And us as service providers, we should facilitate that. And this is where we look at ourselves as ION, as shaping the future of mobility. So we look at demand, we look at what is required in the market, and that's we work together with other partners as well in the region, and how we can make it accessible to people. Biggest challenge again is not the infrastructure. I think the infrastructure can be delivered with the investment needed, but it's again the transportation sector, the agencies, the factories should also focus on the UAE, or at least the Middle East, because I think with all the funding over here, and I think even in the region over here, funding is never an issue. I think the issue is it starts from the manufacturer, because they find it that it's difficult for these electric vehicles to be sold in the region, because we are an oil-rich company, but that oil-rich country. But that's not the case. That's not the case. Many people actually want to drive an electric car because they have a job to do towards the environment, and factories are not supporting it. But I think. When I normally ask myself this question, and I say, what's general public's attitude towards green mobility, and is there a challenge or an opportunity here? I think the challenge is how we can convince the general public to convert, using ICE vehicles to electric vehicles. Again, some people are used to the sounds of the engine. How can we change that? How can people have a bit of conscience towards the environment? There was a study, an Italian study, saying that there's no link between green self-identity and sustainable mobility behavior. So there is no link. And users are more likely to engage in eco-friendly behaviors, starting with their actions that require less, for example, sacrifice. I think, Dubai. When we look at Dubai, for example, they've crossed a huge mile into how they can, enable and facilitate, sustainable movement by having cycle paths, having free parking for electric vehicle owners. EV cost is never, and I think Sam mentioned, EV cost is never an issue. I think the capex, the upfront cost, is slightly expensive, but the overall running cost is much cheaper. And I think as a business owner, I'm in favor of electric vehicles over a normal combustion engine, and the reason is, over a span of 8 years, that's according to the book value of the vehicle. On a span of 8 years, I tend to spend much less on electric vehicles running costs over an ICE vehicle. But I don't need to change spark plugs. I don't need to change brake pads, for example. I don't need to change, filters, etc., etc. So it's much cheaper, and this is what the general public need to understand, that it's much cheaper to run and operate an electric vehicles. We've done a study with one of the universities in the UAE, and they discovered that if they run an electric vehicle over a span of only 5 years, they would end up saving close to 30% in their running and operational costs. So that's the difference. And I think any business owners, I think it's a good opportunity. Yeah, I think that's from my side.
Thank you so much for your insights, Nasir. It's really very nice that Jordan is moving forward, and I think the other MENA countries also should get some advices or follow their strategies to increase the electrical vehicles in our region. Mark, here I would like to ask you also, you have been in UK market, also you're coming from Europe, and now you are here in Middle East for 8 years. You are experiencing, you can compare both policies and people interest. What are your thoughts? Why MENA is not increasing these numbers? What is the challenges?
Okay. I will be a bit controversial on some of the previous comments, because for me, I don't believe it's the responsibility of the manufacturer. It needs to be demand created in the market, and once you create the demand, people will bring the vehicles. From the point of view today, there is no demand. Now, if you want to create demand for electric vehicles, you have to go back and you have to look at policy, you have to look at regulation, because until we do that, it won't change here. One thing that puts a consumer, you need to look that we have two real consumers. One is the retail consumer, the other one is the fleet consumer. The fleet consumer will probably put a lot of electric vehicles onto the road. That's the biggest area that you're going to sell into from a distributor point of view. If you take that on that basis today, the fleet consumer is looking at his total
I think we are having a problem, Mark. The network is not very good. Until we solve this, I think maybe we can get Rami's opinions, and once you are back with better connection, we can continue from there. Is that okay for you? Okay. So Rami, now the floor is on yours, and you have lots of experience also in Jordan, Amman, and you have been managing many companies, and you are well aware of the technologies. So how can we create this demand, and can you please let us know your thoughts about green mobility in the region?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Barihan. Good morning to all of you, and thank you to CEBC for inviting me to take part of this in this annual summit. Grateful for this opportunity. But before I answer or get into the topic, I'd like to provide some background on CATIC and CATIC mobility and the values that drove us to enter the e-mobility space. CATIC has been striving to provide a sustainable solution to global challenges since its founding in 2015, including digital transportation solutions that supporting governments and enterprises in maintaining business continuity, and smart waste solutions that helping cities and municipalities in achieving their environmental and sustainability goals. In 2018, CATIC partner, in 2018, CATIC partnered with EVBox, the world's largest EV charging manufacturers and EV charging infrastructure operators, to provide durable EV charging solution and to extend EVBox reach in the Middle East and Africa region. Since then, CATIC Mobility, the e-mobility division of CATIC, has proudly achieved major milestones by investing and partnering with key e-mobility industry stakeholders in the market region, or the MENA region. From the EV market development perspective in the region, we are witnessing a significant growth. The market is projected to be driven in the near future by growing focus of governments across the area on promoting the use of electric vehicles and higher awareness of energy storage solution in the renewable-based power sector. Furthermore, in the coming years, the expansion of the 5th generation based telecommunication network and the execution of vision documents in Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait are likely to help the MENA region EV market. However, the MENA region is very diverse, especially when it comes to clean energy ambitions and action. We at CATIC Mobility has been actively working in the EV market charging business across the region since 2018, and have witnessed the developments in most of the countries like Jordan, for example. The high price of gasoline in the country and custom tax are contributing to the gradual shift of consumers toward electric vehicle. And significant investment is made for the implementation of the Jordan National Vision 2025 initiative by the government to support the green and the clean energy projects, such as an installation of 3,000 charging points in several parts of the country, and lower tax as compared to conventional and hybrid vehicles. However, right now, most of the EV owners uses residential and home charging station, which have a relatively low power rating. It's between 5 to 7 kilowatt and long charging time. In public transportation, the government has replaced hundreds of gasoline-powered cars in its fleet with Tesla EVs. And it is planning to purchase over 150 low-emission buses, including 15 battery electric buses, as part of the rapid transit project in Amman. The number of registered, as my colleague Nasir mentioned, the registered EVs in Jordan has increased to over 250,000 so far. And we are expecting to reach over 100,000 in the coming 2 to 3 years. In terms of development in the KSA, SASO issued rules governing the use of electric vehicles. And the first commercial EV charging station was installed in Riyadh in August 2019 at one of the petrol stations of SASCO. And also Saudi Arabia has entered into a couple of partnerships and alliances to develop nationwide EV charging infrastructure and to develop technologies such as smart grids and electric vehicles. It's worth to mention that Qatar announced in December 2019 that it plans to introduce a fleet of self-driving and emission fleet electric shuttles to help improve urban mobility by 2022. Also, the Qatar Investment Authority and Qatar General Electricity and Water Corporation, Kahrama, has commissioned an EV charging at the Kahrama complex in Mazmir. Egypt, they are doing, I would say they are doing well so far, as they started operating electric buses in Greater Cairo and Al-Iskandariya since 2020. The Egyptian government also has started to locally manufacture passenger electric vehicles and charging stations. Incentive has been introduced and encouraged EVs, and custom duty exemption for the electric cars also introduced by the government of Egypt. In general, the Middle East market expected to grow rapidly in the coming years, despite the fact that oil is a major source of national revenue and domestic fuel in several Middle Eastern countries. The governments are focusing on renewable energy and the clean transportation technologies, as well as the implementation of economic and energy diversification plans. Though the African EV market is still in its early stage, various key players in the market are attempting to establish new facilities for product development, funding alliances, joint venture, and acquisition with major market players, thereby increasing their market presence. So this is in general our perception and insights about the EV market development in the Middle East, Parehan.
Thank you so much, Rami. It's very nice, like observations, and like we have learned also from other countries in the region. And thank you a lot for informative information. Mark, you are back, and now the connection looks better. We are sorry for the problem, but now we can continue. All looks good now.
Okay, let's try it again. Okay, is it better now? Is that better? Yeah? Okay, good. I just want to make sure. Okay, I think really if we look back from a manufacturer's point of view, and I'm looking at that, we need to create a demand in the market. And as I've said, the TIV is very low here today. And even if we take it across the region, Dubai probably has 5,000 vehicles. Some of the other Gulf countries have nowhere near 5,000 vehicles. I know from the Saudi Arabia model that currently we're going through as manufacturers, the regulations are very difficult to even get approval for electric vehicle. So that will be slowing growth. But really what we need is policy and regulation to drive this forward, because everyone has to play a part in this. Without the policy and regulation to begin with, it won't drive the market. We need to inform the consumer. We need to look at a lot of areas where total cost of ownership, people see an EV today, if you look at it generally, that it's an electric car, and the first two questions you always get asked are, how long does it take to charge? And how far will it go? They're always the main two questions. We need to overcome that. And even with when you look at a lot of the surveys that have been carried out, the Yellow Motor survey that was carried out 2 years ago, it indicated that 80% of people were looking as an electric vehicle for their next car. The problem is we see a lot of surveys with this type of information, but we don't see the execution of that 80% going to electric cars. Today here in the market, I quite agree, there is not the offer. That's one of the biggest problems. And manufacturers won't come with an offer because they feel today the price, and without incentives or without demand, they're not going to sell into the market. And again, the agencies have a responsibility because they are the distributor for the manufacturers here, and the agencies are more driving in the area of internal combustion engines, because it's really about what the profit model is and can you sell that vehicle at that price. The consumer doesn't understand, is clearly one of the points, especially on total cost of ownership and the whole life. And from that point of view, he sees the upfront price as the obstacle. He doesn't look at it as over a term. Even though we can produce information to show people, people still feel much more comfortable going to a fuel station, and it's even easier today. Let's be honest. You CAFU come to your house and they fill your car. You don't even need to go to the fuel station. So convenience keeps people in what they're used to. For me, one of the areas is to focus a lot on the next generation, because the next generation will behave in a different manner, for sure. They will probably use a lot more public transport because the need for a car, if you live in built-up areas like Dubai Marina, you don't need so much of a car. Everything is on your doorstep for the infrastructure. But they will, at some point, we will move to car sharing, which is one thing. If you look in Europe, car sharing is developed massively, especially with electric cars. We've got 3 or 4 projects from a Renault point of view running in Paris and in other parts of Europe, which are very successful. And people prefer to go, take the car, use the car for a short period of time. They don't own the car, they rent the car at that period. It works very well. So I think for here, that's the future. The infrastructure is really in place. There is an infrastructure which would support a growth, not a massive growth, because if we sold 10,000 cars, electric cars next year, we wouldn't be able to support it for an infrastructure. But today, the infrastructure is there to accelerate a growth. What we need to do is policymakers need to work with manufacturers, with agencies, to look at, to create the demand in the market. I know the 25% target, but the 25% target is not electric vehicle, it's green mobility. So hybrid comes into this. Is hybrid pure electric vehicle? It still puts out emissions, hybrid. If we look at all Dubai taxi, we see Camry, Sonata. Okay, those vehicles are running a lot of the time at speeds above 50, 60, 70 kilometers. So they're running on the internal combustion engine. They use the electric engine when they get into traffic and built up areas. So as a long-term answer, it's a short-term answer that enables you to meet a target. The target should be clearly focused more on electric vehicle. And as I said, regulation is one way. So if we take Europe, and we can look at Saudi Arabia, but really if we take Europe, with the CAFE and the WLTP that the European Union introduced and the emission standards, it's driven the market to go towards electric. The manufacturers have to find less polluting vehicles. The emission standards are very stringent. So more electric vehicles have been pushed into the market, and governments have also introduced policies where they are going to ban the sale of internal combustion engines at certain periods of time. Now, that's the way to drive the market into this. And if you've got that there at the beginning, it does 2 things. It conditions the consumer. The consumer knows what's coming and he'll have to move to that. And the manufacturer has to produce vehicles to be able to sell in the market, because if he doesn't produce those type of vehicles, then he goes out of business. So that's what I say is really we need to create a demand, but everyone needs to work together to create the demand, and we need to look at the education. The education of the consumer is something, and that is really key, that if we want to sell into retail and get more and more people, we can't work on a system where we're selling today. And if we look today, probably 5,000 of those vehicles, or of the 5,000 vehicles, 85% of those vehicles are Tesla. The market needs to be broader. We need to have other manufacturers coming at a lower offer price, maybe not so high-tech vehicle, because that's what we've got to be looking at. Tesla is a very high-tech vehicle, but that doesn't suit the need of the general mobility requirement. That's just a percentage of the market. So we need to make an offer which suits everyone's needs and enables people to get electric mobility. That's the other point. So that, when we look at it, the bigger picture is really we need to all work together for sure. And the policymakers need to come together to look how they can change this as well. And they can, because they will drive the manufacturers, they'll drive the agencies, they will really control everything on that basis. On that basis, you develop your ecosystem, because we're in a good position here, I think in Dubai for sure, is that we've got a charging infrastructure here that can sustain an increase in sales. In some areas, you wouldn't see that. Jordan, yes, Jordan started with nothing and it was home charging, because we originally, 6 years ago, first charged the Royal Court, who changed their complete fleet into electric vehicles, which Renault was part of that, along with Tesla, along with BMW, and they used home charging and a very, very basic home charging system, which showed it can work. So you get rid of all the stigma of my charging issues, and it really does work on that basis. So for me, from the point of view is electric mobility, we have a lot to do. We have a lot to do, I think, but we need to relook at the incentives. The incentives today to the consumer, if we look at those, free parking, free SALIC registration, and that's for the retail consumer, not the fleet consumer, I might add as well. It doesn't really drive someone to incentivize someone to buy an electric vehicle. You either have to increase the taxation system, whereas what they've done in Europe is, considering there's taxation systems, they've used the system to support the sales of electric vehicles by giving an incentive to the customer. Now, that's one way of doing it, maybe with increasing registration on internal combustion engine and using the financial funds from that to try to support electric vehicles. So you'll make the switch, and if you want to drive internal combustion engine, you pay a higher price, but you give the people that want to drive an electric vehicle, you support them to make the switch as well, is one way. And that was really how it started off with governments in Europe. Okay, now the emissions have driven it even further forward, but that's what we really need to step back and take a look, because really, if you take it, we haven't moved a great deal on that subject in the last 5 years or the last 3-4 years. We're still where we are, and it does need some form of policy, because I feel that we will be in the same position probably in 2 years' time and having the same conversation that we have on many of these type of summits regarding that we've got not enough cars in the market. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, so much. Yeah, it's a very nice panel discussion. Actually, like we have from like vehicle side, green parking, and also government and technology side. I think all your like feedback is very important for market to develop. Before we start Q&A questions, like I would like to share our full results. So we have only 2 votes. One question was, do you have an EV, electrical vehicle? And 90% of the attendees said no, and only 10% they have EV. But because of the number of attendees, I can easily say only 2 people in this panel has electrical vehicle. I understand from the numbers you shared with us, the percentage is low in the region. So maybe this is backing up the numbers actually, because many people still don't have EV cars. And the other question was, what are the challenges of EVs? Limited technology, pricing, limited charging stations, policies, and other. I'm very surprised that most of the votes went to limited charging stations. So people think that there are not enough charging stations, and they see this is the biggest challenge. Sam, what do you think about this result? Is it expected? Do you think people all think in that way?
Yeah, this is because of the misperception. As I said before, at least in the UAE, we have a world record. We have achieved the world record between the number of cars and the number of electric vehicle stations. If we continue rolling out at the speed that we are rolling out, installing charging stations at the moment, every single electric vehicle that is in the market will have its own smart charger. Yeah, so this is not an issue. It's only a perception or misperception, and so far it's not really a problem. It will become a major problem in the near future. So at the moment, the biggest problem is we have no cars. I have to repeat, it's shocking. Only 1 out of 1,000 cars that were sold last year came to the GCC region. It is not acceptable. And I have to tell you, and here I have to disagree with Mark. The car manufacturers are, for them, it's very easy to sell their cars now in Europe and America because they're getting subsidies, or the buyers are buying subsidies. And they simply do not have the production capabilities to also provide cars to our region in substantial numbers. We saw it when the Tesla Model 3 was offered in our region. It was a huge success, and it's not a very expensive car. We are talking about 170, 180,000 dirhams. So it's a middle-class car range. And I am sure that all the other car manufacturers would be able to have these successes in our region as well, if they would be willing to provide these cars. You see here, it's not only something that the government has to do. I think in Dubai, the government and the utility have done a great deal by providing the infrastructure. It is really the suppliers and their agents who have to push in order to make it more successful. 5,000 cars in 10 years is not considered a market and is not acceptable. It's simply not acceptable. And this shows me that in the next couple of years, we must have our own electric car manufacturing industry. And I'm sure that's going to come. We see it now in Saudi with the first joint venture that's starting in Saudi Arabia to produce electric vehicles. We see it in Jordan, as Rami, in Egypt, as Rami told us before. And the good thing is that producing electric vehicles is not as complicated as producing combustion engine cars that requires hundreds, if not thousands, of sub-suppliers. In the era of electric vehicles, you can have your factory that's able to cover the whole process and the value chain of manufacturing electric vehicle. So we become independent from what other countries and what other regions decide. Because if tomorrow Europe decides to increase the subsidy for electric vehicles, then it's of course in the interest of the car manufacturers to focus on selling their electric vehicles there and not here. And we cannot become dependent on these kind of decisions. We must become more independent. And so this is my strong belief, and that's why I'm an advocate, and I'm strongly pushing for it, because as Mark said, we will be sitting the next 2 years and talking about the same thing. Actually, we have been sitting the last 5 years. The last 5 years, we are talking about the same. We don't have enough cars. We don't have enough cars. Yeah, next year, inshallah, it will be better. In 2 years, inshallah, it will be better. It did not improve. So now we have to take things into our own hands and make sure that we have the cars that our region needs to combat the two major issues: climate change and pollution of our major cities is our responsibility, and we have to provide the regulations and the policies and the modifications and the incentives to make sure that our population adopts the cars more successfully, and the manufacturers supply the cars. And last point in this regard, we have now a worldwide chip shortage for the next 2 years. Suddenly there are not enough chips to produce the number of electric cars which the international car manufacturers have planned to produce. So just because there is a chip shortage in the world, does it mean that we are again having to wait for the next couple of years to have a major increase in electric vehicles? I believe no. I believe not, and we should strongly advocate to make a push to be successful in this regard in the coming years.
Thanks, Sam. And like UAE is leading many technologies in the world, and I would like to also ask Nasir, like there are shortages, but do we have like internally in the UAE like any developments for EVs like this? I mean, anything we can do here to increase at least the electrical vehicle interest?
Thank you. I think the major challenge over here is that when acquiring an electric vehicle, the first question, like Sam said, how long it will take to charge the vehicle and what's the distance. Now, if charging points or charging station will be able to be a head-to-head in comparison with a typical fuel station, then that's when actually the demand will pick up. But that's the biggest challenge, and I think the investors or charging point operators or stations need to invest heavily on DC. And I mentioned it earlier. I think the key to success here is to try and match the same speed, more or less. And like I said, we've experienced it in Abu Dhabi, we've seen it, and people are actually lining up to charge their vehicle at these ultra-high fast charging stations. Now, you may not be able to match the speed of a typical filling station, but if you go to a typical fast DC station, you would get an easy 100 kilometers, 150 kilometers in, let's say, less than 10 minutes, or 10 to 15 minutes. And that's for you to go, for example, into a cafe just to grab a cup of coffee, a sandwich, etc., and then go back on the road. I think if charging point operators should focus purely on DC, I think that's the winning formula over here for mass adoption of EVs.
Okay, thank you, Nasir. And like there is a very nice question coming from audience, Mark. People are saying like the fuel is low, cheap, and there are big cars. People are enjoying the power. Well, what should be their motivation to go EVs? Like, especially like in UAE, how can we convince people for this?
You really, that is one of the problems. Is the fuel is cheap? People like power. Okay, EV cars have power. And the technology has changed massively, and it's developing all the time. So you can produce the same type of power, if not more, with some EVs for sure. You do have the issue that people still, I will be the older generation, like to hear the noise of the engine. But even with an EV, and with modern technology now today, you can replicate that noise to the driver in the car. So you can make that as though it's feeling. You can do those type of things. The biggest thing for me really is total cost of ownership, of the ownership. People see that the fuel is cheap, but do they really understand on what a full tank of fuel is, the equivalent to one charge of electricity is? And they'll find when you do a comparison, is they'll find it's around about 40% to the cost of a tank of fuel on the same kilometre on it. So it's actually cheaper on the electricity side than it is the fuel side. But that's something that never ever gets put forward and publicised. So from the point of view is really total cost of ownership needs to be more raised in the awareness over the long term. And at the end of the day, it's all about how much money do you put in your pocket. You'll put that money for something else. Maybe you can increase and buy a better model EV. You know, people don't, they see the upfront price, and that's the thing that we have to turn around. There is a price up front, but total cost of ownership over a period, that's the price. And when you look at the price against an internal combustion engine, and as Nasir said earlier, you will find that you don't have oil change, you don't change spark plugs, your brake pads are changed less frequent because of the braking system. It's amazing how much money that you do save over the period. And I think some of our studies show that we can save up to 50 to 55% of the total cost of ownership on that basis.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And so I will ask our last question to Rami. So Rami, what do you think? What is the business model we need to consider, you know, to increase the demand? And can you please elaborate a little bit more? Rami, you are unmute. Can you please unmute? Yeah. Thank you.
It's a very good question, Parihan. Actually, the business model through which you provide the EV charging could have a positive impact on the overall uptake of the EVs. We believe there is a massive potential to offer EV charging services and take a slice of the business. However, it is important to mitigate risk from investment, build a sound business case, keep the operating cost low, and ensure profit from EV charging. At Katik Mobility, we work with businesses to deploy EV charging station through multiple business models, powered by our robust cloud-based CEBC system. We have been working with our clients and the host location to design a program that fit each location's need while providing the much needed infrastructure for the growing EV driver demand. We have introduced a few unique business models at Katik Mobility, which helped our customer, mainly in Jordan, to provide a wider EV charging services, which is the charging as a service. You know, the Jordan market is quite sensitive to the price of the chargers, and there is a lot of local charging provider, and they sometimes it's not safe. Some of the model it's not safe, and there is a lot of challenges with the modified batteries in the market. So we've been working with the car dealers and the petrol station, and we came up with the charging as a service model, which properly anyone now familiar with other as a service model, such as software as a service or hardware as a service, which offer access to smart solutions at a reduced cost through subscription pricing. Same here, we as a CATIC, we own the chargers or charging point and offers them to the EV owners to use as a fixed subscription fee. CATIC CAS business model provides EV charging with no upfront cost and without any of the hassles, which we saw like demand on this and in the developing countries. The other point I believe I need to add also another point regarding the public-private partnership. I believe the public-private partnership (PPPs) may offer a promising way forward and accelerate the development of charging infrastructure by tapping the private sector's financial resources and the professional experience. However, the PPP has not been commonly adopted in this sector yet. And from our experience, we've seen that when the private sector works closely with the public sector, the market develops faster and more efficiently. There are many of the current challenges for EV adoption where the private sector can play a vital role to support the governments in such as installing more accessible charging or public accessible charging station. I'm not talking about UAE, I'm talking about the region in general, because we believe UAE one of the leaders in the charging infrastructure and the infrastructure. As Sam mentioned earlier, the ratio between the EV and the charger the highest worldwide. So, but I'm looking at the other countries. So, private sector and the partnership with the private sector could be a solution, and the government incentives, as Mark mentioned. But again, I'm with Sam regarding the car manufacturer. From personal experience, we at CATIC, we were like looking to electrify our fleet. But when we looked at the market, we couldn't find a proper vehicle or car that will fit our operation needs. So then we decided to go back to the ICE, and which I believe this would delay our electrification initiatives for at least 3 to 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rami. Now we are out of time. There are many questions coming. People are very hungry to speak about this topic. I can see like everybody is interested. I hope we will have more time, but unfortunately we reached our time. And I would like to thank you everyone for attending this panel and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.